So for our 10th lesson in our Epistemology unit, today's class was about the Ship of Theseus and how it relates to self-identity. So let's begin with the story of the Ship of Theseus, a story that's been told for thousands of years. So here it goes. Theseus was an Athenian hero who sailed to Crete, defeated the Minotaur, rescued some Athenian captives, and sailed them back to Athens. In his honor, the Athenians preserved the ship and used to sail it around on parade once a year. Over time, however, various bits and pieces of the ship needed repairing. No problem. They just found some new parts, shaped just like the old parts and made of the same materials, and made the repairs. It seems plausible that it was still one and the same ship, even after some of these repairs were made. Now suppose that over time, every part of the ship eventually gets replaced in this gradual, piecemeal way. Here's the question. Is it still one and the same ship? Here it seems a bit more problematic than before to say it's the same ship, but we might persuade ourselves that, since the replacements were all gradual and piecemeal, and since it doesn't appear like any one of the replacements caused the original ship to cease to exist, and a new ship to spring up in its place. That, yes, this is still the same ship as the original Theseus ship. Of course, it has undergone some qualitative changes, but that was also true of the ship when Theseus still owned it. Back when Theseus owned the ship, it was constantly getting wet, having pitch applied to it, and even having parts replaced. That's the ordinary course of events for ships. Now let's add a new twist to the story. Suppose that one enterprising Athenian collects all the discarded parts of the original ship. As time goes by, his collection accumulates, and eventually he has all the pieces of the original ship. Then he carefully puts these pieces together according to the design of the original ship. Next time the annual Ship of Theseus parade comes around, he brings out his ship and bills it as the real Ship of Theseus. The other Athenians are dismayed. They thought that the ship they had been carefully repairing all these years was the Ship of Theseus. Who is right? Which ship is one and the same as the original ship? The carefully repaired ship, or the ship built out of discarded pieces? Now, that story, you can riff off of that in a lot of different ways, and philosophers have been doing it for a long time, from Heraclitus to Plato to Hobbes and Locke. So for this class, we're going to apply it with self-identity. Now, considering you are all juniors and seniors in high school, a big part of that is figuring out your self-identity. And certainly, high school is a time to delve deep into your self-identity. And I'm glad you're taking philosophy to help that cause. So let's think of yourselves. Who are you? What is the original you? And again, bearing in mind, you are going to have many changes in your life. Now, there is this idea that every 7 years that we go through fundamental changes based on solar cycle variations and whatnot. And I don't want to delve too deep into the science, but I'm going to take my own personal example and apply it to this. I'm going to ask you to do the same. Now, you're going to have to speculate your future. A lot of my years have already happened. So on a piece of paper, I asked you to do the following things. Number 0, 7, 14, 21, 28, so on and so forth, in increments of 7, going under the premise that we go through fundamental changes to our self-identity, to ourselves, every 7 years. And I asked you to skip 3 lines after each number. And here's what I asked you to do. Who were you at the following stages of life? Now, when we all checked in, we were all in the same boat. We were simply growing and trying to survive, and we didn't do a whole lot. We slept and we ate and we grew. So our starting point is pretty much the same no matter who you ask. And then 7 years from that, we were all little kids, and little kids act like little kids, and they play, and they are learning the basics of the world, of how things operate, and basic skills. There's me ripping my brother's head off. Fairly typical for a 7-year-old. And like most 7-year-olds, I was just a kid, playing and going to 2nd grade and the following. But then things change. By the time we get to 14, different identities are associated with us. Now, here's a picture of me at 14, and if you were to ask me at 14, my identity was the football player, and here's me playing football. Now, at my age, I don't consider myself the football player. I didn't do so at age 7, But at 14, that was my be-all, end-all. And then 21, here's me at 21 graduating from Michigan State. My identity at that point was a college student. That's a long ways away from being 14 and being 7 and being born. 28, I was single. Here's my dog. And I was just trying to get money and live life and experience things and, enjoy my young adulthood. And then at 35, if you were to ask me what I was, teaching. Teaching was my primary identity, and people knew me as the teacher, and not the football player, not the college student, not the single guy hanging out with his dog. And at the age of 42, I consider myself a father above everything else, and here's a picture of my kids and I. So if I were to go back in time from 35 to 28 to 21 to 14 to 7 to 0, technically I've always been me, as you will always be you, but what is the authentic you? Are very different. So I'm asking you to guess where you will be at every stage of life. For me, I have to gauge the future years like you do. How will our identities change? How will our authentic self change is the fundamental question. So here are the questions I wanted to have you discuss and eventually write in your journal. Number one, what do you consider an authentic self-identity? How does one achieve being authentic? How do you gauge that you are authentic? It's a tough question, and it relates to the Ship of Theseus. What is the real you? What is the phony you? And I think in high school people are trying very hard to figure that out. Question number two, what does it mean to be original versus derivative? So for example, a lot of times movies get remade from an old movie. Is that derivative? Is that original? Songs that use samples from an original song. At what point is it an original piece of work? At what point is it derivative? And then three, why are original objects worth more than replicas? And this applies to art, antiques, sports memorabilia, etc. So if I have a motorcycle that is an original 1930s motorcycle with all the parts, even though they're rusty and beat up, that will command a higher price than a replica motorcycle or a piece of sports memorabilia. If I had a phony signature on a piece of sports memorabilia, it won't mean anything if the actual person signed it. Why is that? Why do human beings do that? Why do we place such an emphasis on what is real, and how do we gauge what is real? So again, this is an epistemological exercise. We're thinking why we think. And so hopefully this exercise had you question these things, and I hope you can see how the Ship of Theseus applies to many aspects of life, and certainly many aspects of philosophy, in particular epistemology. So thank you for watching.